Welcome to Melt University. This series will help you build your brand, inform you on a variety of career paths, and introduce you to top executives in sports and marketing. Now, here's your host, the president and CEO of Melt, one of the largest independent sports and event marketing agencies in the country, Vince Thompson.
Welcome back, students. Virtual Melt University. When you're listening to this, we'll be heading into the holiday season, Thanksgiving, Christmas. Hopefully you'll be able to enjoy it safe and successfully with your family. Hopefully you've had a really good semester. Hopefully we'll get to the other side of this pretty quick in 2021 and kind of get things back to quote normal or the new normal, whatever that is. But we do appreciate the continued feedback and support, the listenership, the comments. I know you're reaching out to our guest as well, and we have a very special guest today that I think is going to share a lot of insight and advice to you as you move into the real world or the virtual real world or whatever the heck we're going to call this thing going forward, as we know the new normal. But Jack Markwalter is the CEO of CIBC Private Wealth Management. More than 30 years in the private client and investment industry, graduated with the highest honors, Georgia Institute of Technology, Georgia Tech. We've got a great relationship with the students at Georgia Tech. Harvard Graduate School of Business, Harvard Business School. We had Erica Tuggle on early in our Melt U a few weeks ago. Harvard Business School obviously is the gold standard of this. Got more than 30 years of experience in the investment industry, but more than that, he really personifies as the service leader model in the industry. We talked to you a lot about giving back. What did you do with yourself during COVID? Did you help others? Did you gain empathy? Jack is a beacon in the Atlanta community, sets a tremendous example with his work with many organizations, Children's Healthcare, Atlanta History Center, Big Brothers Big Sisters, one of my favorite organizations. And so we'll talk about the servant leader and how important that is when he looks for potential employees. We're going to talk to you about some sage decisions that you should make now. Coming out of college and obviously going into the virtual environment where the employment environment is going to be challenging as well. So, Jack, welcome to Virtual Melt University. It is an honor to have you on.
Well, Vince, it's my honor to be here. I've followed you from afar for several years and followed your career. And I really like what you hit on being a servant leader, because I firmly believe that it's incumbent on all of us, especially if we've had some degree of success, to give back to others and bring others along. And frankly, Vince, that's the most fulfilling part of my career and my life.
Talk to, before we dive into it, because I think this is, to me, this is one of the most important things in my professional life. It's one of the big driving reasons we do this for our students at Melt University, in particular, especially now. But talk about the importance of laying this what I'll call an empathetic foundation now when you're in college and it doesn't have to be like, you don't have to recreate and save the world, but even if it's serving a hot meal to an elderly or helping build one house and Habitat Humanity. Talk about the importance of it, and talk about when you're hiring or your people are hiring, how those types of activities will stand out to you as you're seeking to make a judgment of who you're bringing into your workplace.
I think it's a great question. And to give back is, I think, so important. And not only when we're hiring, but Vince, when we look at the culture of CIBC Private Wealth and what we built, what we talk about all the time. We've got a little over 500 employees. We're managing about $77 billion. We're in 24 cities around the country. But what we do, we tie it together with this common culture. And you said it well. It's a common culture where service and being a servant leader is part of that. And so what we stress to our people is that there's sort of three constituencies that we should all that we should all focus on. Then I'll kind of back up to a college student. But what we try to really focus on is putting the client at the center of all we do. So that's our first C. And then our colleagues. And then third, our community. And to your point, when we interview people, when people go through the whole process and we spend time scrutinizing and having them meet either in person or now virtually with a dozen plus of our team members, we look for people who have excelled. We look for people who have certain basic technical skills, but even more importantly, we look for people, frankly, that have high integrity, that we think have high integrity, and we think that have strong values, and that we think give back. And I think being a servant leader or having the view that we're all in this together and that we've all been blessed. And when we've been blessed, I think even more is required of us to give back. So you're spot on. When we interview people, there are certain sort of basic things that you have to have with good college degree, hopefully reasonable grades, extracurricular activity. But you're right. When we see people that volunteer and give back to other people and their community, that is really, really important. And we also tie that in with integrity and ethics, because we really believe, I think Billy Graham said it, he said, right is right and wrong is wrong. And that's in all the small things, and that's in the big things as well. And so where we look for ethics, we look for integrity, we look for community service, and people that are willing to give back, that are willing to think beyond their own situation and help others as well. And when we recruit, that's a key part. I would say, Vince, it's a differentiator, because most people have the grades and college degree and things like that. But that's community service and being a servant leader and integrity and ethics is a real differentiator for us.
And it really doesn't matter what it is that you're doing, because like I said, my mantra is too much has been given, much is expected, and we're all in a very blessed generation, and so that's why we always encourage our kids. Is like, and I'm gonna tell you, Jack, one of the first things I ask kids now is, what did you do to better yourself and better others during COVID? And if they hold up and played video games for 6 months, I'm going to immediately flush them out of consideration set. But even if they made an effort to improve themselves and improve the lives of others, and that's what we talk about to our students ad nauseum, is that these intangibles add up to tangibles. Correct?
No question about it. I think the intangibles are so important in terms of a mindset of giving of yourself, a mindset of helping other people. And then you also said, which I'll touch on another point, it's a mindset of growth. And when I say growth, it's personal growth as well. It's improving your skill set. And one thing I would think, and I'm just sort of thinking off the top of my head, but one thing that we recommend to a lot of young people that are in college, that are coming out of college, that are starting to head toward the work world, please try to find a good mentor. Well, you got to find a good mentor, and if you can find more than one.
Hey, we're going to carve out. So put that in the parking lot, because we're going to carve out a lot of time in this interview for mentorship.
Okay.
But because you're preaching to the choir here, and we talk about it, but I want to do a deep dive on mentorship in a minute. So,
okay.
So let's throw it all the way back. Well, before we get into a lot of this, we always like to talk to our guest about their passion. Where did the passion come from? How was the passion formed? How early was the passion formed? How did it manifest itself when you were in your undergrad and graduate experience? I had a great passion. I love sports, and I love to write about sports. And I went to Auburn to be a sports writer, and I got lucky and got on my path with sports information and all that. But did you always have a passion to be an entrepreneur and a businessman? Was that sort of your goal? Or so? I mean, your accolades are endless, but even taking on the great Herschel Walker in high school, from what I hear. But But talk about how important passion is as a driver, because if you discover what you're passionate about, you'll never work a day in your life.
No, I agree 100%. I think passion is a key to success, and passion keeps you going when it's pretty dark and it's pretty rainy and the wind is in your face. That passion keeps you posted, keeps you focused, and helps you take it to the next level. And so when I think about sort of my background, real quickly, I grew up in Augusta, Georgia, from a close knit family.
So did you grow up with John Sherman?
Yeah, John Sherman is a little about my age. I think he's a year or two difference, but yeah, I know John. He's a great guy.
So John has been one of my guardian angels. John Sherman, CEO of Coke United, he's been one of my guardian angels for many, many, many years. So we've talked a lot about Coke and the distribution system, but so
yeah,
you grew up with,
great family with the Sherman. So I grew up in Augusta. We had a family of 4, but we had a big extended family. We had 46 first cousins that all lived in Augusta. So we kind of grew up in a big extended family. And I played sports all along in high school. I went to St. Thomas Aquinas. I played football. I played tennis. I was student council president. But I would say the theme that I had from a relatively early age, probably about 8th or ninth grade, was leadership and really enjoying sort of working with people and having a common goal and motivating people and working alongside a team to get things done, whether it was sports with football or with student council, or then at Georgia Tech, I also was quite involved. Sigma Chi fraternity, where I was at Sigma Chi, I was involved with the Ramblin' Rec Club. And then I was actually student body president there, which was kind of a scholarship position back
at Georgia Tech.
I was, yeah.
Oh wow! I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and like you, I ended up working for the athletic program, not just when I was a student, but for 3 years after.
Right.
I met a gentleman named Homer Rice.
Oh my God!
One of my great mentors. Homer's 94 years old. Talked to him the other day. He just got off. He's down in Florida, Naples. He just got back from a long bike ride. And not on the Peloton, outside.
Yeah, the way we used to do it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so Homer was a mentor of mine. I met him when I was student body president. And then Bill Curry, who
oh my God,
coached there, Crimmins, all those guys, Jim Morris, the baseball coach, Punky Blackman, golf coach. I got to know all of them. And so after being student body president, I stayed on at Georgia Tech and worked for the school as a fundraiser for 3 years. And it was the best decision of my life. And that's one thing I would tell all of our listeners is don't worry about how much money you make on the first job. When your first job, you look for experiences. You look for interacting with people, with networks, with principals, with learning things. And that's what I learned because I was, 20, 21 years old when I graduated. And they basically said, we want you to go out and call on all these different CEOs and entrepreneurs throughout the Southeast and get them to give money to Georgia Tech. And we specifically raised a lot of money for athletic scholarships because Title IX had just been passed. And so they fully scholarshiped all the women's sports.
Right.
And you had to have the same number of scholarships for women and men's sports. And you had 85 for football. And so I helped raise money to scholarship, either fully or partially, 16 different sports. But I had an incredible experience getting to know Homer Rice, who's one of the best leaders, one of the best sort of positive thinkers, sort of attitude technique. Bill Curry, Bobby Crimmins, all these people were passionate about what they did, and they were passionate about what they were trying to accomplish. And they were able to all motivate other people to work alongside them toward a common goal. And so I kind of was blessed early on to be shaped and formed.
Wow! That's the Mount Rushmore of leadership that you just lined out. But you hit on one thing, and we talk to our kids about this a lot. The where they are now. Forget where we are with the COVID and all that, but where they are in the next 3, 4, 5, 6 years, the campus is the ultimate professional laboratory. And that's what I tell all the kids. Look all around you, no matter what your passion is, you have an opportunity to begin laying that foundation, that groundwork, and we get back to the intangible, because this whole job application is, it's not an application, it's a process, it's an audition. So you're padding this resume, you're networking, I was driving Paul Feinbaum to the airport 40 years ago, and now he's one of my closest friends. So talk about that. They just encourage these students to look all around them, and those opportunities are right before their eyes for the taking.
Absolutely, and really, really well said, Vince. There's so many opportunities in college campuses and communities to get involved. Find things that you're passionate about, find things that you enjoy. And
Mhm.
frankly, you don't have to do that many. I'd rather you do one or two things and go deep than do
I
six
agree.
things and go shallow. So I think if you
Totally.
find one or two things to give
Totally.
back, find things where you can learn from it, find things where you can develop lifelong skills. And I would say, Vince, also, that even when you're coming out of college, have a plan. Have a plan. It might be a
Mhm.
1 year plan, a 3 year, 5 year. I still have things that I wrote down when I first started my career and said, here's where I want to be. When we first started CIBC Private Wealth, I wrote down when I came in, we were about 7 billion under management. And I said, I want in my career to be 50 billion. I want us
Wow.
ultimately to have 50 billion under management. And
Wow.
so we kind of then put in place all the sort of objectives each year to head toward that. And then also make sure we do everything in a really, really high quality way. But for students, I think to have a plan and think about it and write down, it doesn't have to be fancy at all. You could
Spot on.
say, here are 3 or 4 things I would like to be doing 1 year from now, three
Mhm.
years from now, 5 years. And then if you
Mhm.
could find people that you see who've been successful and you could say, gosh, I kind of want to be like that person, see if they'll be a mentor for you. And if you'll handle it right, they'll actually see it as an honor to be your mentor.
Absolutely. So talk about we've hit on mentors, and I think that, and I want to unpack relationships, but I think having mentors, and you still have them, I still have them. I think it's one of the most important things, that a young student can have. But Jack, you don't want a mentor that's going to sugarcoat anything and just tell you what you want to hear, do you?
You're exactly right. I think you want a mentor that is going to give you real constructive feedback that
Hmm.
will help you get better, even if it's not what you want to hear.
Right.
So I agree with you 100%. I think you want a mentor. I look at my different mentors. My dad, who's 88 years old, has been a mentor for me. So I was fortunate with that.
Hmm.
Homer Rice, athletic director at Tech, was a big mentor. And then with in New York, when I was in New York for a number of years, a guy named Matt Caputo was a phenomenal
Hmm.
mentor. And all of them, to your point, they would tell me, give me some advice of what I was doing well, but they would say, here, you've got to do this differently. You've got to listen more. You've got to take more time to pace yourself because it's a marathon. You've got to give back more to the community, whatever it may be. So you're exactly right.
Yeah, I mean it's all part of the growth process, and I'm pretty tough on this generation. I call them participation generation, but I do find that a lot of the students really gravitate to want to hear the truth, and now they've, maybe for the first time in their life, they've been thrown into this enormous tumble cycle even a little sooner than they maybe thought they would have because of COVID and the virtual learning, and the depressed employment market and those types of things. And so, but you've touched on another big thing when you talk about Homer Rice and Bill Curry and all these people, the importance of building and maintaining relationships. And Jack, one thing that I always tell our students is that a relationship, people say, well, Vince, how have you represented Coke for 20 years? I go, I never take that relationship for granted. And you got to cultivate it, water it, fertilize it, trim it, prune it. And the first two letters of relationship are RE, and the first two letters of reciprocal are RE. And it's got to be a give and take relationship. But talk about, I keep stressing this over and over to our students, the importance and value of building relationships, but maintaining these relationships, particularly as it relates to the climb of your early career?
I think you're spot on, and frankly, Vince, I think the way you said it was exactly how I think about it. You gotta to build relationships. You got to kind of work at it. You've got to cultivate it. It's give and take, and you've got to be a little bit deliberate about it. You got to
That's a
think
good
about
word.
it when you do that. And when I look at it, it's relationships. You don't take anybody for granted because when I was at Morgan Stanley in New York in the mid to late '80s, I taught a training class from all the new people that came in, actually for 9 months, every day for 9 months. Now, many of those people from the 5 years I taught the training class are running wealth management firms all over the country. Like we do, we buy other firms and kind of keep building. I look through the list of the top firms around the country, and a number of them are sprinkled with the students. Now they're
Right,
45, 50 years
right,
old. So
right.
keeping those relationships is key.
I think that, and again, it's something, even just a simple gesture like, checking in. And it's a great thing. I hear from a lot of students. And because, I mean, Jack, when you and I were coming up, we had to go to the library. We had to get encyclopedias. We had to get yellow pages. These kids can click three buttons on LinkedIn and establish a communication with me or you. So and establish a relationship, even if it's virtually right now. And you will hear from a lot of these students, but also, and we talk about a lot about this, and I call it the grandma test. If you wouldn't want your grandma to see it on social media, don't post it. Okay. Now, I'm not talking about you expressing yourself or you're being authentic, but one of the first things you and I are going to do as potential employers is we're going to look at that person's social media profile, but we're looking at the judgment they're exercising in their behavior and the judgment or lack thereof they're exercising and posting about that behavior. Wouldn't
You're,
you say that?
No, you're spot on. I love the grandma test. You have to assume it's going to be on the front page of every newspaper and magazine in the country. When you put anything in writing. And Vince, to your point, one of the more difficult things I've had to do in my career was one of our real up and comers who had some issues with his use of the internet and what he was taking pictures of and sending.
Right.
Happens to someone that was really up and coming, an absolute sort of 5-star employee that a number of years ago we had to part ways with simply over because of their sort of internet protocol or how they use social media and how they use the phone. So I think that's really really important to make sure that you'll have sort of an online reputation, and it takes a lifetime to build a reputation. It takes 2 or 3 seconds to lose it. 2 or 3 seconds,
One
click.
keystroke, you're dead. Hey, but by the way, tell our students this. We're going to go look at their profile, correct?
No question about it. No question about it. What happens is, when we hire people, people do a background check. We look at it, but we have a system in place where people go do a background check, and clearly social media is part of it. So I think you've got to be cognizant of it. You've got to be aware of it, and you've got to know that what you put out there is permanent and it's like a boomerang. It comes back to you. On the other hand, to your point, on a positive note, social media, the internet, phones can all be very, very, very helpful. For example, I've had a little brother who I've worked with, believe it or not, since 1977. So that's 43 years now. He's 51. I started working with him when he was 8 years old. He's now 51, and we lost touch for a few years. But now with the phone, it's unbelievable. When we get off of this podcast, I can text him or call him or whatever. But we keep in touch by text. We keep in touch. So I think there's some real advantages to social media and to technology. But you have to be very aware that you've got to use it the right way. When you use it the right way, it's a competitive weapon. It helps expand our horizon. If you use it the wrong way, it can be devastating. So I know people now, your listeners, will use it the right way for the better.
Well, we also, to your point, because the whole axis of my book is about building and positioning your brand. for a job in the marketplace. And as I said, I don't mind you being authentic and expressing yourself. I respect your opinion, but you can also use it to position your brand. So, if you're out delivering Meals on Wheels, or if you're out building a house for Habitat Humanity, or refurbishing a playground or something like that, you also can use it as a very powerful, positive social tool and social weapon in a positive manner, weaponize it in a positive manner to position your brand as, hey, I am an empathetic, cause-related, community-related figure, and if CIBC is looking at hiring me, or Mel's looking at hiring at me, they will see the outlines of these as we go back to forming the impressions and the intangibles. The entire employment process is an audition. It's a process. It's not an application, and so many of our students are not getting that information. But so talk about some of the things at your level, and then you've got this massive, staff of 500 people. But what if somebody is soliciting you? And first of all, the generic solicitation is an instant path to getting flushed from our employment cycle. But talk about when somebody is soliciting you or your staff. What are the things that can get, or will get, or do get your attention? Because we know there are tricks of the trade. I say, hey, leverage those emotional connections. If you knew that you went to Georgia Tech, or you went to Harvard, or your son played football at Auburn, use those emotional low-hanging fruit. It's also showing you they've done their homework on who you are and the type of employee they would make and the value they would bring to your organization. Correct?
Correct. And again, you said it so well, but so I think anything you can do before a meeting or get together to connect and read background and make points of connection. But I think even more important is, frankly, basic things like be kind, be polite, be respectful, and most important, be appreciative. When we have interviews, in fact, today, someone called me just to go to lunch. I'm going to lunch at Blue Ridge Grill with someone that wants some career advice, and so I'm going to do that. But they were very respectful the way they kind of approached, and very knowing that I was busy and sort of flexible with the time of doing it. But what I also look for is after you get together. I mean, I think I know it's rare, but I think a handwritten follow up thank you note is just a treasure. It's just a real differentiator. Very few people take the time. It can be a real short on your own stationery. It only has to be 3 or 4 sentences. But I think some sort of follow up, if it's not handwritten email. Frankly, when we interview people in the process, we wait to see how they're going to come back to us. And if we don't hear back from them, they become eliminated from the process. So I think being appreciative, follow up, writing someone afterwards and thanking them for taking out the time and pointing out a few things that you may have learned. But I think you can do that electronically. But I think it's even more, it really is priceless when you do a handwritten note. I still keep some of the handwritten notes that I've gotten over the years from people looking for jobs or people that were appreciative of things I've helped them with. So I think that how you handle yourself and just basic being respectful and manners, because I've actually had people where I was going to interview them, but they're even on the phone and on via email were very abrupt and not very appreciative. And I said, you know what, I've got other things I can be doing. But when someone is respectful, polite, just basic things like please and thank you, it really does mean a lot. I know it sounds a little bit old school, but it means a lot. And again, if someone doesn't write us after we've interviewed them, we wait for them to write us. If not, someone doesn't follow up, then the process ends with that.
You just ripped a page out of my playbook. It's one of my 10 commandments. Letter writing is a lost art. A thank you note is a lost art. And Kyle will tell you that I have kept in my career every thank you note that I've ever received. Wow. And I can tell you that if a student, and Coach Bill Battle was one of my mentors, and he taught me this, but if a student writes me a handwritten note, they automatically move in the 5 percentile of my consideration set for employment, contract work, favor, whatever it is. And by the way, to your point, it only can just say, hey, thank you, Mr. Markwalter. I appreciate your time. Thank you for your advice. I look forward to following up. Boom. 3 sentences, right?
Bingo.
Get yourself some note cards. People remember these things. And that's what I keep going back to. Know your target. Know that Jack is old school. Know Vince is old school. And you're going to, and these kids go, well, what about a text and an email? I'm like, look, that's great, but that takes a hell of a lot less effort than handwriting it down, getting an old timey postage stamp, dropping that sucker in the box. I'm telling you, and particularly now in this employment environment, the intangibles are going to rule the day. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because that is absolutely that's one of my biggest things. I still, like I said, remember them, and I still do it myself. So this is great. We could go on all day. There's a couple things that as we kind of like to wrap up. What outside standard industry publications, what are some great books, or, and you're busy, but you're a vociferous reader, I'm a vociferous reader, books, podcasts, sources of information. And we've heard a lot of great ones across the board. We've gotten a lot of old school. We've had John Wooden brought up several times, Pyramids of Success for his book. But what are some timeless go-tos that our kids could be reading over the holidays or listening to over the holidays that are great timeless sources for you?
That's a great question. I've thought a lot about this, and if I were going to give one book to each of my 5 sons, and I've given it to several of them, but based on this podcast, I'm going to buy a fresh copy for each one of them, and that's the book by Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I think it's the Bible of interpersonal relationships. It talks about treating people with respect. It talks about treating people with kindness. It talks about how criticizing people comes back like a boomerang to punish you. So it's not to always treat people with respect. It's a phenomenal book. I'm actually listening to it again on video on tape as I go on my long walks. But I think it's a phenomenal book, and I would recommend it to every one of your listeners to read it and reread it each year. I know it took Dale Carnegie 15 years to write it. He had input from several thousand people, but even though it was written in probably 80 years ago, it rings true today. It really rings true. And the other one, Vince, who I really like with the podcast, John Maxwell. I just think John Maxwell, what he's able to do for leadership, for self-improvement. And I would even credit John Maxwell in a podcast that I listened to early in COVID. It was March, and everything seemed real bleak, and our business seemed bleak. And Maxwell said, a time of crisis is a great time of opportunity and a time of growth. Figure out how to take advantage of it. And like you've done with your business, to pivot your business, we pivoted our business to 100% virtual. We're going to have a record year, for all-time record year this year in the midst of COVID. But I really think part of it is attitude. I think part of it is that positive can-do attitude. I think part of it is planning. And I think part of it is how you treat people and having a culture that looks at clients, colleagues, and community.
Well, it's funny you should bring up Dale Carnegie. That's one of the first things first books my dad ever gave me, and I still have it, and I still reread it. I still reread it every year. So students, and we'll put this in our newsletter as well. Some of our suggested reading over the holidays, but if you haven't read Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, it is absolutely one of the Bibles. And tenets of business, servant leadership. I mean, and I wish they still had those franchise classes. I took one of those in Birmingham when I first got out of college as well. My dad took one as well. And then obviously John Maxwell, is tremendous voice. Make sure you listen to John Maxwell. So as we wrap, we always like to ask this question. With all the greatness that you've been surrounded, with and by, and the people I have the highest regard for, Homer Rice, Coach Curry, and all these great people. What's the best advice that you've ever been given that you would want to share with our listeners?
I think the best advice would be do the right thing, do the right thing, be true to yourself, maximize your potential. But I think doing the right thing, when you're embarking on a new endeavor or you're thinking of what you're going to do, just that simple phrase of do the right thing really, really comes back in spades to help you. And if you don't do it, Vince, as you know, you could derail your career or your life. But I think do the right thing. Really focus on ethics and integrity, and then also focus on doing the most you can do to leave the world much better off than before you were here. Leave the world much better off by your life and by what your contributions are. But it all starts with do the right thing.
And you hit on something too, is that if you get into an organization, you got to get into an organization that you share your values with, and their values equate to your values. And you can figure out pretty quick. And I've been in the middle of it in my life, as you have, and we all have. But to your point, do the right thing, live by your values, be authentic, trust your gut. If you get involved with a person or a mentor or relationship or an organization where it doesn't square up with your value systems, it's okay to step back and remove yourself from that, because it's normally a person or persons or an organization that you don't want to be involved with. And I think that you hit on that and so many other things, and just tremendous interview today. And I think you guys can see why. Jack Markwalter is a gigantic leader in the country, servant leader in the country. Has been just a tremendous leader and contributor to the growth of the great city of Atlanta, where we've all done very well, been featured in many publications: Wall Street Journal, Barron's, CNBC, the Who's Who. 5 sons, so he probably can write his own book. 6 sons, if you include Kyle, can write his own book about tough love. I may contribute my son to Jack as well, to whack him around a little bit too. But just great advice. I mean, what great mentors you had at Georgia Tech. Tremendous learning at Harvard. CEO of CIBC, managing nearly $60 billion in assets. Hopefully, I'll be able to give him my billion one day in about 100 years. But Jack, we really do appreciate your time and your wisdom, and what you've done for Kyle, because he's so important in the life. So thank you for joining the students of Virtual Melt University today.
Well, thank you so much, Vince. I really am humbled and really honored to be on your podcast, because you truly are a giant in your industry. And I've heard and observed you from afar. I'm really excited that we had this time together. And I thank you for what you do for young people, especially in these sort of trying times with COVID.
Right.
But you and I both know this is a time of great opportunity.
Tremendous.
Where there's adversity, there's opportunity. Where there's disruption, there's opportunity. But Vince, thank you for what you do for so many young people. You are a beacon of light.
Well, thank you.
And we greatly appreciate all that you do.
Well, I tell you what,
everyone, and for Kyle.
Thank you. I mean, it's the most important thing that we can do. And you know what? If we can touch one life through this podcast, and we can touch one life through this interview I did, and we can change one life and give them hope and encouragement, then that was a good day for us. And that's the way I look at it. We talk to our students about putting that goodwill in the universe, putting that good karma, putting that positive energy out there, because you just don't ever know when it's going to come around. And so we keep telling our students, keep fighting, keep believing. Right now, in chaos, there is opportunity. It is the most sophisticated generation of consumers ever. And they have an opportunity to truly use that sophistication and parlay it into a tremendous professional and personal, growth and path and opportunities. And we're seeing a lot of it. There are tons of people that are responding. So Honored to have you on. Looking forward to breaking bread and breaking down a lot of other burning issues of our day. So, Mr. Markwalter, thank you so much for joining Melt University.
Thank you, Vince. You're the best. Thank you.
Thanks, Vince. Hope you enjoyed today's virtual class. We'll be back soon with another edition of Melt University 2020.